In this episode, you will discover what you absolutely need to know before ever committing again to another relationship. Welcome to Heartbreak to Wholeness, the podcast helping you heal from the mindfuck of narcissistic relationships and move towards the secure, peaceful woman you want to become. I am your host, Brie Walta, relationship clarity coach and EFT certified practitioner. Let's dive in. Welcome back. In this episode, you are going to learn the red flags to watch out for in relationships. You're going to know how to absolutely clarify if your relationship is healthy or not. And you're going to discover the number one thing that you absolutely need to know before you ever commit fully to anyone in relationship again. I am talking today with a woman named Denise Schoenwald. She's a licensed mental health counselor. She's an author. She's a family mediator. She's a public speaker. And she wrote a book called Elephants Don't Marry Giraffes, which we're going to get into more in this episode. She and I are talking about all things healthy relationships and what to look out for to signal that you're in an unhealthy relationship, which is so important because after you get out of these types of relationships, these narcissistic or otherwise traumatic, painful, abusive relationships, the idea of dating again can feel foreign. It can feel so terrifying to think that you're going to end up in that same situation. And we need a lot of education around what to look out for and understanding around how to be in our body in a different way when we start interacting with a new person and how to listen to what our body is saying. So we're going to go over all of that and more in this episode so that you feel fully equipped to dip your toe back into the dating pool at whatever point that feels right for you. I really believe it's never too early to start sort of thinking about these things. I know for me, the more that I sit with something and kind of ponder it, the more just slowly I start to naturally inch towards that thing in the future. And if you're like so many of the listeners and so many of my clients, really wanting a healthy relationship and that deep, genuine, delicious love from a person, you're going to have to get back out on the dating field, right? At some point. So we're here to help you do that and give you all the information to help you feel safe, confident, and knowing that you can do it. And as you're listening to these episodes, if you're like, oof, I really need to dive in a little bit more here, need to do some deeper work around that, I have an interest form link in the show notes that you can fill out at any time to get in touch with me to see how we can work together. And be sure to stick around to the end of the episode where I'll pull an oracle card. This will offer you just a simple message that you can sit with, meditate on, absorb into your aura this week as you step forward in your healing. Welcome to the podcast, Denise.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am thrilled for this conversation today because so many of the women listening are coming out of relationships that didn't make any sense or that were very painful. And maybe they see some of the red flags that got them into that relationship in the first place. But most, if not all of them, are like, how do I not do that again? So today we're going to talk about how to know what a healthy relationship looks like, how to know that you're in one, and to get to speak with you, Denise, about all of the couples that you have worked with in your clinical practice is just such a pleasure. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
I know you have a lot of information on the topic. Where would be most beneficial, do you think, for women to hear about healthy relationships?
Well, currently I'm a mental health counselor and I practice here locally in Sarasota, Florida. I see a lot of couples. And one of the things that I think is important is when we ourselves are not healthy, and I mean mentally healthy, balancing stress and certainly working through our own issues, it's very difficult to have a healthy relationship. Relationships are like mirrors of our own sort of struggles and so forth. And if we are not clear on what we're going through and struggling with, it's impossible or very difficult to find a partner that's going to help us have a healthy relationship.
Yeah, attracting that person that mirrors our wounding or that feels familiar in some degree to our childhood or to previous partners. It can be sort of mind-bending if we are not putting together the pieces of why we're choosing the people that we're choosing. And of course, there is manipulation and coercion that can go into that, especially when you're in relationship with a narcissist. But there is a lot of places, even in those relationships, that we can take accountability as the person on the receiving end of that.
Yeah,
And so diving in and really learning who you are, learning your boundaries, learning what you expect in a relationship, all of that is such vital work to set you up for success.
absolutely.
Yeah. So what are some red flags that we can have listeners look out for as they are maybe starting to think about dating again, or maybe that idea is just like so scary to them that they need a little bit of help, like even easing into that idea of something that's possible in the future?
One of the things before I was a therapist, I was a critical care nurse. And we used to say illness has a history. So when someone would come in with something, it wasn't that just sort of popped up. It actually had sort of a backstory. So it was very important to understand what led up to their heart attack or some particular disease. Relationships also have histories. And when you're getting into a relationship, it's important to understand and take the time to learn about this person's history. If they have a history of very toxic relationships and so forth, I mean, we think that maybe we're now the right person and we can sort of correct all this, which is unfortunately very irrational to think that we can all of a sudden save this person or we're the better person for them if they have a history, a long family history with, having a lot of dysfunctionality and toxicity, it's not likely that we're going to form a very healthy relationship after that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Getting curious about how they even portray their history. I know what can come up a lot with my clients is the man, in most cases,
Mhm.
the narcissistic person, describing all of their exes as the crazy bitches,
Yes.
right? Or like
Hmm.
how insane those women were and what rigmarole they put the man through. And oftentimes that's not truth. Oftentimes the man actually did the things that he's saying that the exes had done to him.
Hmm.
But when you're in that position of hearing from somebody that you're just starting dating that you really like, that they were treated so poorly by all of these women, part of our heartstrings, I think, get
Hmm.
tugged. And this happened to me too, where I was like, oh my gosh, you don't deserve being treated like that. And to your point, I'll be the one that will treat you right. I'll be the one to show
Yes.
you that there are good women out there. And that is such a slippery slope to roll into.
Yes. And you'll notice that when this story is being told, there's no accountability. I also,
Yep.
didn't treat her well, or I also had some struggles and so forth. And that's sort of a really important missing link.
Yes. Yes. And that is how us as women who have been through these relationships that are horrifying, right? When we start to share some of our dating history with the new person, I know another fear that I know I had and a lot of the listeners have is that I don't want to come across as crazy or say in the similar category of like
Mhm.
saying all my ex-boyfriends were nuts.
Yes.
And so to your point, what you just said is so important and I want listeners to really hear that you can explain your history while taking accountability for your part in that
Mhm.
history. And that is the critical difference of saying all of my exes were crazy versus I attracted some unhealthy people because I was in an unhealthy place. And this is the work that I've
Yes.
done.
Yes.
There forward.
Abs
Yes.
ab
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. So how people describe their histories, what their histories actually are too, and factual from what
Mhm.
their childhoods looked like. And I'd throw in there perhaps like if they've done any work around that.
Yes. Because a lot of
Yeah.
times they just want to move on to the next relationship.
Yes. Okay. So that's the first red flag. What would be the second?
The second would be that it's very interesting. I took also a family mediator. And one of the things that I learned in this class was that it takes about 3 years to really get to know somebody because, we get caught under the pheromone spell where we think they're wonderful and everything they do is fantastic. And, we sort of get in this delusional state where we think that this is our forever person. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but we need to give it enough time and space because what happens as relationships start to evolve is you start to notice and you become aware of things. Maybe what the relationship's like with coworkers, how they handle stressful situations. And these are all really important. One of the first questions I ask for couples is, how long have you been married, if they're married? And how long did you date before you got married? Many times it's,
Mhm.
oh, we only dated 6 months and so forth. And now they're usually around the 3 year mark where they're starting to have some problems.
Going through several seasons with people is so important.
Yes.
I've heard that advice in sort of a smaller magnitude where it's like you want to be with somebody through at least four seasons, like one
Yes.
calendar year, to see even how seasonality affects them, or if a job loss happens, or shifting, or somebody gets sick and they have to step up or don't. Right? You see a lot of a person's personality through time and the decrease of the dopamine and the oxytocin and all the things that are happening in our brain when we're in that beginning stage.
Yes.
And specifically with women who are in narcissistic relationships, that time period to come out of the love bomb window is really important. And oftentimes when things start getting more normal, when there's less excitement, you see the masks start to fall,
Hmm.
and that can be really challenging if coupled with that was a marriage or a pregnancy or something that is tying you more directly to them.
Yes. Or if you're all of a sudden financially invested in each other, you've bought a house together or something that now this is becoming more complicated.
Yes. So 3 years is what we're thinking for the a good amount of time to be able to see people in all of their colors.
Yes, and I was a little surprised at the length. I thought 3 years was a long period of time, but
Yeah.
over, doing many, many studies, they're noticing that right around the 3 year mark is when you're really going to see exactly what you've sort of signed up for.
And within those 3 years, also inserting different, places where you can set boundaries, where you can hold your stance, right? And
Uh,
see how that person responds to you.
Yes.
Because I know that that's a missing piece in a lot of the relationships when we're looking in hindsight of, "Oh, I just sort of went with the flow," or, "I just
Mhm.
did what he wanted to do because I didn't wanna rock the boat."
Mhm.
And so the sooner that we as the more empathetic person who tends to get into narcissistic relationships start to set boundaries and start to maintain a sense of self, the more you're gonna see if that person is receptive to that, if they celebrate you in your independence, if they, like you to be your own person, or if there's some freak out of losing control of you that starts to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so paying attention to histories, paying attention to how they talk about their histories,
Mhm.
and then spending some time, at least 3 years, with somebody so that you can see them in a full breadth of situation. What would be a third red flag or
Right,
something to look out for?
and I'll tell you this one is key. When we get uncomfortable in a situation, the first thing that we go to for help, if you will, is the mind. And the
Mm,
mind is, it's like a computer. It remembers things. Maybe sometimes you don't even remember them accurately, but the mind is generally fear based. And so what we will do is we'll either overthink it or we create scenarios that we think might happen and so forth. And when we're in this sort of fear based state, we're not making very good decisions. A narcissist is extremely perceptive to energy, and they can tell when you're in sort of this fear mind state, and they prey upon that. I mean, they know that they can use that to their advantage. What we don't do is sort of rely on our instincts or intuition. How does this feel? What am I noticing? The mind jumps right in and starts to predict, but yet these time where you just sort of let it sit and let the energy play out is so important because that's where the true essence of the relationship is lying. What exactly is
mhm.
happening. It can be
Yeah.
difficult because most people now are sort of at a steady, anxious, stressful state, and then add a relationship in there, and we're not as insightful as we probably should be.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think most of us are in some sort of sympathetic nervous system response, like
Yes.
most of the time. And you add a toxic relationship onto that and you're just living in this constant boiling water.
Mhm.
What's a one way that somebody could start to tap back into that intuition because I hear that a lot. Like I've lost it. I can't trust
Mhm,
myself anymore.
mhm. And this is one thing that we really don't want, or the mind doesn't give us any ability to create is space.
Mhm. Yep.
And because the mind is always urgent. I used to be a critical care nurse and we think everything has to be done right now. Actually, when I was a critical care nurse, everything needed time. We would
Mm.
hang some medicine and we would see how they did. It
Yeah.
wasn't quite as everything has to be done right now. The mind gives us this false sense of everything needs to be figured out or it's not going to be okay. And yet sometimes you just need some time to just get some better understanding and awareness of what's happening, how they're responding to me, how I feel when I'm around them. Am I constantly got a knot in my stomach? That's not healthy. But we ignore that because the mind thinks, we're judging them or whatever it thinks. And unfortunately, that will lead us down a path that we might not want to go on.
Yeah. And with the space, we have to be receptive to the answer.
We do.
I think that that's a critical piece of this because if you're not willing to see the possibility of what is happening, the possibilities of what the relationship is, you will continue to go into the justification
Mhm,
space with what is happening. So I almost see this as worked in the addiction field for almost a decade before
mhm.
becoming a relationship clarity coach. And I almost see it as like a rock bottom that we have to hit where we are we are mentally open to change.
Yes.
And sometimes that change doesn't happen for months or years, but when we hit that critical place in our own psyche, then we can almost like allow in all of the data. And
Mhm,
I work with my clients on gathering data. Like what is actually happening in the relationship? What what do they do when you set a boundary?
mhm.
Not not so much emotion around what's happening, but what is happening in the relationship. Because in the emotion is sort of in that fear-based quick place where we start to go to justifications.
Mhm.
So having the space to gather the data and being receptive to the data.
Yes. And the willingness to do something different. The mind comes in and we fear change. We feel sort of rocking the boat. And yet, this is what's needed because this is why it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But we
Oh
don't
yeah.
we don't like to be uncomfortable. So we'll go along and it's interesting because we do is we create a more difficult and challenging situation because we don't want to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's so backwards because it's uncomfortable no matter the which way you cut it, right?
Correct.
Oftentimes, especially in these types of relationships, we're anxious, we're unhappy, we're not living as our best selves in the relationship,
Mhm.
but still the fear of leaving is bigger than, oh well, I know how to do this dance, right? It's the devil you know
Mhm.
versus what you don't. And we can get really sucked into that place and convincing ourselves that whatever is on the other side must be worse than where I am. And I'm just going to tough it out, or I'm just going to fix him or fix myself, or whatever the focus is, I guess, that we
Mhm.
put on to try to gain some control of the relationship.
Yes. And the interesting thing is this is how energy works. When we continue to just sort of accept and keep pushing forward and so forth, eventually what happens is the body will start to weaken and we get sick. And of course,
Yeah.
we don't correlate the fact that I'm constantly sick or I'm coming down with all these illnesses or diseases back to the fact that I'm in a very unhealthy relationship. Few people can correlate that they have actually a very definite connection.
And it's such a phenomenon that we see over and over again
Mhm.
with chronic illness or just being like literally sick with colds or flus all of the time because your immune system is so taxed.
Yes,
But our energetic space is directly tied to to our body and our mind, and we're one whole complete being. There's no separation there.
correct. And since you were referencing addiction, watch what the mind is choosing to go to for relief. So these are how
Yeah.
addictions start to creep in because we're so unhappy and the body is really feeling stressed. So the mind comes in with again a not so great choice of what we can do for relief. And these are where eating comes in. We seem to like our devices are becoming our number one sort of favorite thing for relief or for ease. And
Yeah.
all the, as you know, with addiction, this just gets worse and worse and worse. And then the body continues to weaken because the mind is really becoming overstimulated.
And devices specifically are so normalized. It's so normalized to just like doom scroll on
Mhm.
Instagram or TikTok or binge watch Netflix. Like it's we can easily scoot that aside as, well, this is just something that I like to do,
Mhm.
when really it is being used in some capacity for a numbing behavior.
Yes.
And especially if you're not, like, if you're not coming out of a state of sort of blah, like maybe you're not in total depression or total frustration about the relationship, but maybe it just feels stagnant. It feels like I'm not happy, I'm not having highs, I'm not having lows, I'm just sort of existing.
Mhm.
And getting really real and honest with yourself of, is this a way that I want to spend my life, spend my days and my nights, just looking forward to my Instagram scroll as like the most exciting thing to do next to my partner.
Yes. Or we don't trust our partner, so we're constantly seeing how many whom they're liking on Instagram and they're following and all of that. So that now it's even getting more and more complicated.
Yes. So finding some space, finding some nervous system regulation so that we're coming out of those habitual things that we're doing to try to relieve the pressure,
Mhm.
but actually giving ourselves the space to move out of the pressure.
And one of the things that will always sort of help us is how the body feels. I always say,
Yeah.
people say, I go, but how do you feel? Because we don't take a minute to just see how is this sitting on the body? Because the body is extremely sophisticated.
Can you give us an example of this? Because I'm just imagining the listener being like, I don't know how I feel. Like, what if they haven't really had practice of tuning into their body? Have you worked with a client or someone that could give a good story of what that looks
Well,
like?
or maybe all of a sudden you're in a partnership where maybe it's the guy's very, very controlling. So he comes in and he starts to ask two or three questions and your heart starts beating a mile a minute. Maybe you start to get really sweaty and so forth. Okay, this doesn't feel right. This feels very controlling and so forth. The body will quickly try to regulate itself. I mean, which is usually why we start to perspire and all that. But we've got to step back and say, why is it every time I'm around this person, I don't feel right? There's something there's, and I do this a lot of times with trust. Like somebody will come in and I'll say, there's something about them that I'm not trusting their story. And, and I'm asking questions, but something just doesn't feel right. Or I'm
Yeah.
seeing a couple and I feel like I'm missing a couple pieces. I don't really
Yeah.
know why or what I'm missing. There's just something just doesn't feel right in this situation.
Learning to tune back into that,
Mhm.
especially when you've been gaslit or otherwise told that your reality is wrong or that you can't trust yourself or your instincts, can be so challenging
Yes.
to to reorient ourselves from the external back into the internal place.
Mhm.
So I just want to normalize that for women listening, that that is often one of the biggest hurdles that we get over or we get through in moving through these types of relationships.
Over
Yeah.
explaining and so it's almost like you're trying to make your point, and that's also a red flag. It's like, why do I feel like I have to explain all of why I thought what I did and why I did it and why I didn't do it, and it becomes a lot of words that are very meaningful to say that there's some problems in this relationship.
Yeah. Because healthy relationships are supposed to be easeful,
Mhm.
right? They're not easy, but they are more easeful where there's not a lot of, to your point, like trying to explain your partner's behavior to your family or your friends or yourself. There's not a lot of trying to justify their actions
Mhm.
because it's contradicting what you feel,
Mhm.
right? It's just sort
Yes.
of things align, and it's not so much additional energy that we're putting into existing with a person. I think sometimes, or maybe like a big overarching red flag, is just feeling completely exhausted all of the time
Yeah.
in your relationship, when your relationship is supposed to be that thing that helps you recharge. It's supposed to be that safe place for you to come back to, your home base. It's not meant to be an additional suck.
Yes.
that takes you away from your work and your friends and your hobbies and your sense of self. And, it's just like, wow, am I exhausted all the time is a good question
Mhm.
to be asking yourself when you're kind of thinking about how you feel in the relationship as well.
Mhm. Yeah, nicely said.
Your book that you wrote, Elephants Don't Marry Giraffes, was wonderful to read, and I want listeners to look this up because the way that you structured the client story, the couple
Mhm.
story, and then gave your clinical thoughts and then
Mhm.
gave your therapeutic advice. It really helps you put yourself in those shoes and then see what you as
Mhm.
Denise, as the
Mhm.
therapist, would say to me potentially, right? If I'm
Yes.
experiencing the same thing. The having the information in different ways of what relationships can look like and why that isn't so healthy was
Yeah.
really powerful. So
Well.
thank you for organizing your experience
Mhm.
in that way for women, and I'm sure men are reading the book as well.
Mhm. Well.
In thinking about that, thinking about your history, thinking about all of the work that you've done with couples, what do you think is like the number one thing that we need to think about before making a commitment to somebody long term?
Well, I'm sort of coupling this with what you just said. Relationships need to have flow. We need to give, we need to receive, we need to nurture them. Many couples don't really spend the time or make the time, as particularly when we have children and careers, to invest in each other. And although they're challenging, they shouldn't require so much effort. We should have some understanding and some ability and some problem solving and so forth. If the relationship is so overwhelming and so exhausting and so much work, maybe we need to take a step back and sort of develop some insight. What I see with couples going from one dysfunctional relationship to another is they never take the time to develop the insight of what they learned from the first relationship, and then they just carry the same problems into the next relationship.
And we wonder why we continue to be in the same cycle with different people.
Mhm. And if we're just roommates, I'll say, well, do you make time for each other? And they'll say, well, we watch a show together, but when they're watching the show, they're both on their phones.
Yeah. And especially if you need quality time, quality conversation,
Mhm.
quality experience to feel connection or to feel love, that can feel even more detrimental to be with somebody but not interacting
Yes.
in meaningful space.
Yes. Because we can do
Yeah.
that at the airport.
Right.
We can sit next to somebody, we can both be on our phones, and that that's not really a relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. To go with the word flow that you used, I hate come back to this metaphor over and over again about a couple that's on the same, or let's say a couple that's, sharing values, is curious about each other, is in that give and receive kind of flow.
Mhm.
It's like paddling downstream together. Whereas when you come to rapids or rocks, you can kind of navigate your way around it.
Mhm.
Versus if you're not on the same page with those things, if you're with somebody who is more dysfunctional or you're dysfunctional yourself, it feels like you're paddling upstream. So you're still coming to all of those rocks and those rapids, but you're also moving the wrong direction and expending all of the energy to just try to get through the day.
Mhm.
So that when those big things come, you're completely wiped. You can't navigate through the same way as if you were in the boat rowing with the partner in the same direction.
Yes. And remember, when we're connecting with each other through anger, so having a lot of argument, jealousy, both want to be right, ego. Okay, this tells me that they're both not in a good place. And then now this is how they're connecting. And that's not
Yeah.
going to be a healthy relationship. So,
So the more that we can really bolster our sense of self and really know who we are and know what we're standing
mhm.
for, be using our voice, be using our boundaries, know about our weaker spots based on our
Mhm.
own history so that we can be mindful of, oh, I tend to be passive aggressive when I get flooded with
Yes.
my nervous system gets out of whack.
Mhm.
Knowing your own blueprint, knowing how you enter relationships and work in relationships will help you shift that, help
Yes.
you keep yourself accountable to show up the way that you want to in those spaces.
It's important to be very clearly defined. And when
Yes.
somebody is sort of challenging your boundaries, that you're able to navigate it with ease. Not that it's comfortable, but as you start to panic, they know that they've got you.
They thrive on the emotion. It
They
really
do.
is the thing. They don't want you in the calm, rational mind.
They
They
do
want
not.
you spun up and more easily grabbable
Mhm.
from being in that emotional place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so we have some red flags that listeners can look out for.
Mhm.
Finding the flow when you're in a relationship, really looking for it. Is this feeling easeful most of the time? Not
Mhm.
that we don't come across the rapids,
Mhm.
but are we working together? Is there a give and a take? Is there anything else that you want to leave listeners with today?
One of the things that I feel is the most important is as listeners to continue to do the work on yourself. If you want to have a healthy relationship, if you want to have a healthy relationship with your children, with your coworkers, most people are very neglectful toward themselves.
Yeah.
They don't spend the time in investing what makes them happy, how they can be fulfilled to stay optimally physically healthy, mentally healthy, spiritually healthy. If you want to sort of navigate through life as easily as possible, you've got to start from within.
Yeah, it's the renewable energy source. It's like the
Yes,
once when we have that from within, we don't seek it externally. We don't need somebody else to validate that we are
correct.
lovable or worthy or whatever.
Mhm.
We're just like it's coming from within. The light is shining. We're just shining out.
Yes. And we will
Yeah.
attract that like energy that we're putting in, like whatever we put in ourselves, we will attract through other people, from other people.
I really think that whether it's coaching or therapy or plant medicine or whatever you're using to be introspective about yourself is like the biggest return on investment.
I
It's
agree.
because if you're actually using that to shift the neural pathways, to shift out of generational trauma, to heal and actually do something different, right? You're not just sort of going through the motions
Mhm.
of therapy or coaching, but putting it into action and seeing a different result is is so empowering
Mhm.
at the least and
Mhm.
like life-changing at the most.
Yes.
And so that I know it's a time investment and a financial investment and an emotional investment because this stuff is painful to drudge up, but it's so worth it long term in relationships of all kinds. Okay, so towards the end of these episodes, I like to pull an oracle card as a message that the listeners can use. So I have a deck here and I'm
Mhm.
going to start shuffling,
Mhm.
Denise. And I want you to close your
Mhm.
eyes and just take a breath, tuning your energy into the deck. And we're just going to ask, what is the message that the listeners need to hear today? And as you feel your intuitive pull, you let me know when to stop.
Stop.
Okay. So we got silt, which is a picture of a heart that has silt on it. So let me find this in the book and I'll read you the message. Silt is the mark of the soul's deep remembrance, the fine dust of relationship and experience that infiltrates the cells, coats the heart, the ash of love and pain and tenderness, the silky soft remnants of experiences that have touched, changed, and moved the physical and spiritual body. The fine bits of love we acquire, the ones that stay. After digestion, absorption, elimination, silt is left behind. All we take in, consciously or unconsciously. Silt calls you to remember what matters, the memories that existed even before you came into this world. Honor your past. Remember what you have chosen and what has chosen you. Silt calls you to accept all parts of your past relationships, the pain, the love, and the lessons, knowing that you can scrub away what doesn't serve you anymore.
Mhm.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Perfect message.
Mhm.
Thank you, Denise. Where do you want to point people to find you, to find your book?
Oh, I would love for listeners to visit me on my website, deniseschoenwald.com. If they're interested, I would love to send them a copy of my book,
Beautiful.
Elephants No
Yes.
Marry Giraffes.
And the title is amazing.
Mhm.
I love everything about this book. I really encourage listeners to take you up on that
Mhm.
offer. That's such a generous offer to be
You're
giving away
welcome.
your work. Yes, thank you. And before you go for today, let's just recap a couple of the takeaways, the things that you learned by listening to this episode today. Denise and I talked a lot about the red flags, so you know the red flags to look out for as you start to begin dating again. You also know how to clarify if your relationship is healthy and what the healthy relationship is supposed to feel like. And you know the number one thing that you need to know before you actually commit to anyone. This episode is jam-packed full of very useful information, so I really recommend coming back, bookmarking this episode, and re-listening as you are actively dating to help remind yourself of these things, especially the beginning of the excitement of a relationship, really having this episode as that grounding anchor for you to come back to. And I know you are on your journey to really do relationships differently, so I want to offer you my free relationship reset guide. This is a free PDF with a video that's really going to help you rewire your attachment style, help you understand what healthy love looks like, and the things that you can actively do today to start to move more towards healthy love. Going to help you learn how to communicate your feelings without feeling guilty. It's going to help you navigate triggering moments maturely so that we're not acting out from our parts. And it's going to help you feel secure on your own, which is super important while you are dating so that you're not just choosing people and anxiously attaching like maybe you have done in the past, but so that you feel really secure by yourself so that you can find the person who's really healthy and on the same path as you. And as always, you are not alone in this journey, and I'll see you in the next episode.